Morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for the second of our all-in how-to sessions. These are sessions really to help everybody, particularly your businesses, to adopt the action plan that we launched back in June. Really excited about our guest today. I think it's going to be not only a very interesting and informative session, but I think it'll be really inspiring as well. I'm joined by Mike Aladeth. I got it right, Mike.
Yeah, you did get it right.
He's a senior strategist from AMV VBDO. And Robin Christopherson, who is Head of Digital Inclusion at the leading tech charity in the UK, AbilityNet. I forgot to put your MBE on there, Robin.
Oh no, leave that off, yeah.
But I'm going to hand over to both of you to tell us a bit more about your personal experience, why this is so important to you in your daily lives, but also for everybody else in our businesses. But first, I'm just going to set the scene. I'm standing in for our Dan to share the slides, just to sort of set the scenes to what the data showed us for disabled people working in the industry, and why we came up with this first action. So I'm going to share screen now, that on full screen. Perfect. 16,000 people took part in the survey in March last year. We know this is the largest ever survey response for the industry. In fact, we've done a bit of digging around. It's the largest ever inclusion survey that's been recorded in the UK across any industry. And we know, with a rough guesstimate, this is about £500,000 worth of investment of the industry's time. So it was a huge response, huge engagement from industry. And it was taken part by agencies, media owners, tech platforms, and advertisers right across the industry. With regards to the question on disability, we just wanted to flag that it was, as the Equality Act of 2010 defines disability, so it's a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on an individual's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. So that's just the background to the questions. And then diving in to the responses, you'll remember that it wasn't just about how we identify within the workforce in the ad industry, it was also about our experience. So we've split the responses into sort of two categories. So in terms of how we identify, disabled people make up 9% of our industry. So, and that drops to C-suite level just to 6%. And that's against the UK average of 14%. Just to note that that's the UK working population at 14%. And the 9% of disabled people that work in the industry equates to 1,374 people. And two interesting demographics that really stood out for us when we looked at the data were the LGBTQ plus community and age, because these two groups, well, LGBTQ plus particularly, were considerably more likely to be disabled than heterosexual colleagues. We think that the difference is most likely to be driven by the very high proportion of LGBTQ plus people with mental health conditions. And mental health conditions, we're not going to go into detail in this presentation today, but they made up a significant share of the split of disabilities. But also people in the younger age groups were more likely than older to be disabled. And we think this perhaps is counter to what you might expect, and potential reasons might be the much higher incidence of mental health conditions amongst the young. So we recorded that 17% of 18 to 24s and 16% of 25 to 35s report a mental health condition, compared to just 12% across the industry. Another reason could be that the industry is becoming much more open and accessible, or perhaps conversely, that people, as they age in the industry, are more likely to leave. So this was and that's something that we plan to sort of dig a lot more into when we redo the survey in 2023. When we go on to experience, people are much more likely to feel that their disabilities are a hindrance and a barrier to their career progression, particularly due to who they are. So that's 29% that believe that their disability at their company hinders their career. And this is reflected in the very low representation I mentioned earlier at C-suite, which is just 6%. That's there, non-disabled at 14%, feeling that disability, or they're hindered in their career generally. Onto the next slide, in terms of culture, the experience of disabled people in the industry is notably more negative than the industry average. So 1 in 5 people feel that they do not belong in their company. 36% of people feel left out at work, compared to just 20% of non-disabled. And almost half, 49%, feel anxious in their job, compared to 26% of non-disabled people. And then demeaning behaviours, which is probably the most sort of damning of all the statistics, is that disabled people were almost twice as likely than non-disabled people to experience demeaning behaviours in the workplace. Being bullied or undermined affects 22% of disabled versus 11% of non-disabled. Being undervalued compared to their colleagues of the same competence is 40% of disabled people versus 26% of non-disabled colleagues. And 13% are subjected to verbal harassment, insults or hurtful comments, compared to just 5% of non-disabled colleagues. And then we move on to sort of awareness within the company of the conditions or disabilities that people have. A large proportion, at 41% of disabled people, report that their company are unaware of their disability. Now, unsurprisingly, most employers are most likely to be unaware for non-visible conditions such as stress and mental health conditions, which were very high, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the responses, neurodiversity, and also hearing impairments. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, just going back briefly to that one. When employers were aware, however, the majority, 72% of disabled people, feel supported by their company. So that is really good news. There's clearly improvement to be done. 45% feel that they could do more, but I think it's worth knowing that once companies are aware that there is a sort of significant uplift in people feeling supported. And again, it's most apparent in regards to non-visible conditions, in particular neurodiversity. 61% of neurodiverse people feel that their company could definitely do more to support them. So I guess the culmination of all these negative experiences means, and this is the really important stat for us, is that 22% of disabled people are likely to leave their company. So there's really something that organisations themselves can do to retain this talent, and just, you know, ensure that they have that sense of belonging that we all want to have within the workplace. So that is the deck. I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks so much for your patience for that very, very clunky start. I'm now going to hand over with no further ado to Mike, the first of our speakers who's joining us today. Mike, it would just be great to hear from you about how important technology, and certainly keeping up with technology, is important for you in your daily life, and just a little bit about your personal background.
Yeah, no worries, Sharon. Thank you very much for having me, guys, this morning. Thank you for your time at the start of what will be a busy first day, as I imagine. So yeah, I'm Mike, a senior strategist at A&V BBO. I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, so I'm getting on a bit. And to answer your question, Sharon, in quite a blunt fashion to start with, is that technology is fundamental to my day-to-day life and career progression. So I have employed cerebral palsy, which is a condition from birth, and one of the ways that it affects me is that I have quite poor motor skill controls, so I don't have full hand function. So, for example, I've never been able to handwrite or use a pen or take notes. Therefore, technology is fundamental for me to function in my day-to-day career, because basically it's a bit like a day. If I didn't have a computer or if I didn't have my iPad, then I couldn't write a PowerPoint, I couldn't take notes. So it really is so crucial to have that technology and to have it adapted to you. One of the ways I have it adapted is that, again, because of my poor motor control, I can start pressing the wrong keys. So my keyboard is adapted and it has what is called a key guard, and there's basically a metal sheet over a normal keyboard that separates out all the keys and means that I don't press the wrong keys inadvertently. Again, because of my hand function, I'm a bit slower. I use predictive text software, a bit like these days, you know, I'll get on your kind of WhatsApp or iPhone. So when I'm typing, it kind of predicts what word I'm going to use next. So it kind of helps me save time, as in I don't have to write out words all the time, and particularly either writing a deck or presentation or brief where you're using the same language quite a lot, then it remembers that language and will predict what you want to say even faster. So technology in that sense has been really important, and I guess that is very much driven by my personal experience. I guess a benefit has been that ever since I was a child at school, I've grown up with the use of tech. So I've got quite a lot of experience, and I was able to take that into my career to start with. So for example, when I joined my first agency, I was very clear that they needed to get me this key guard for my keyboard in order for work, and obviously I knew all about that because I've been using it all my life. So it's quite easy to go to them and say what I needed and provide a convincing argument. So yeah, that is really my personal experience. I guess a more wider overview is that, as everyone's known, in the last almost 2 years now, I feel like tech can really help more disabled people join the industry. As we all know, we can work remotely now. I'm doing this call from my flat instead of getting to the office, partly because I know to get in for 8:45. But it does on a more serious note, it does mean that disabled people that may have struggled to access the office previously, whether due to kind of physical limitations, due to like the physical access to the building or access to the disabled toilets, or kind of more mental stress and anxiety about getting onto crowded tubes or whatever. I do think technology over the last 18 months has proven that the industry can be more accessible to disabled people because you do not need to be in the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, which a lot of disabled people have found tricky in the past. So I think that is the next big revolution where technology could help disabled people in their day-to-day lives, and as shown in some of the statistics, hopefully increase the number of disabled people in the industry up from 9%, and secondly, perhaps more importantly, keep the disabled people that are already in the industry in their jobs because they feel more comfortable in it, because they have more flexibility and they can set their own work agenda more importantly. So yeah, that's a bit, I guess, that's my own personal experience, and then there's a bit of a more kind of wider view about how I think disability and tech could help advertising. I think my last point is that education is very important, and I think HR departments and ad agencies could be more skilled in being aware of some of the assistive tech options that are available for disabled people, and then conversely, I think disabled people can help agencies and in particular HR departments by being very clear about what they need in their workplace. What I think to be fair to HR departments is that there's a load of assistive technology out there, so no HR person can possibly know it all. So they get help if the disabled individual comes with a clear plan about what they need, and then you can hopefully have a useful discussion off the back of it, even if the piece of assistive technology is not known to the person in HR. So yeah, that's kind of a few of my reflections on having worked in the industry for about 10 years now.
That's brilliant, Mike. I think what's great is you completely echoed the sort of reasons why we chose the first action, which was sort of led by the very great help we got from the Valuable 500.
Yeah.
About how, what's the first step we could take as an industry. And I think it was looking at the virtual front door, as we sort of coined it. Yes. Since coming up with this action. Everybody's corporate website is the front door to their business, and it makes it, if it's inaccessible to the 10 million or so people in the UK who have accessibility needs online, it's a game changer, isn't it? So and it's really helpful to hear from you how that it's not just, okay, I'm interested in working for AMB BBDO, can I get onto their website? It's much more a signal that if we all take part, update our websites and make sure we have got this education internally around assistive tech, then actually everybody that has those needs in our workforce, our colleagues, knows that we care and that we're sort of really focused on this as well. So I love that education piece. I think maybe we'll come back to that in the questions. Handing over now to Robin on the sort of practical side. So just as a reminder for everyone on the call, the action for disability in the first phase of the action plan is to audit and update your website to make sure it's accessible for all. And I can't think of a better person than Robin to talk to us about the sort of how and why from a personal and from your role as head of inclusion at Ability Net. Can't speak today. Over to you, Robin.
Great, thank you, Sharon. I think Bina's going to kindly drive my slides. So yeah, I'm Robin Christopherson. I'm head of digital inclusion at Ability Net. We're a pan-disability, pan-technology organisation. But we also deal with people that have, that would never consider themselves with a disability. If you've got eye strain on a Friday afternoon, if you've got the onset of wrist pain, whatever it is, there is solutions out there that can help. And there is things that people with the responsibility for digital content can do to help with that, with you in those situations. So, it's a much broader group than just the 14.1, I think it is, million disabled people that's registered disabled in the UK. You've then got 6 million people with dyslexia for whom, the considerations that we're going to be talking about now apply as well, and many more with literacy issues, etc. You wouldn't want to turn your back on this huge audience. It's probably a quarter to a half of your audience that are going to be affected by what I'm going to be talking about. So I'll just make it, okay, focus in the wrong place. So I'm going to be talking about the overwhelming case for advertising accessibly, and we're going to cover kind of the different bases and hopefully give a bit of a practical insight as well. So if we go on to the next slide, let's talk about the moral or ethical side of things. So the United Nations, there is a Bill of Rights. It's a human right under the United Nations for people with disabilities to not be excluded from society, to have an equal experience as people that don't have a disability. And as I mentioned before, I think, whilst there is a definition of disability, I think we're all sliding up and down that scale, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So what we're going to be talking about today will actually impact most people in consuming our adverts, in being able to come into the industry, stay in the industry, etc. So this is really, really important. So yeah, as we've seen here, the wording under that convention is basically saying, if you do things in an inclusive way, then you'll be embracing people with disabilities. Otherwise, you'll be locking them out. It's really very powerful, and as very, it's as black and white as that. Really, do you want to include people, or do you want to shut out a whole section of people from the digital world? And we all know how important that is. If we go on to the next slide. So let's talk about the business case just for a second. So We the 15, hashtag We the 15. I don't know if you've seen that on the social medias. It's a very strong movement. It is 15% of the world's population and growing as well. So, this is a very significant proportion of your customers, of your potential clients. 80% of people with a disability are of working age. You tend to think that it's, an elderly type situation. And of course, the prevalence does increase the older people get. But, that's a big working age from sort of 16 to 65 or whatever the retirement age is these days. So no wonder the majority of people with disabilities, many acquired, but many born with, like Mike and myself. I'm blind. So, we've got a head start on you guys. But in America, by the way, the disabled community have a term for people without a disability. They call them TABs, temporarily able-bodied, which means that, it'll get you in the end. So, we're ahead of the curve on that one. But yeah, so it's a very, very significant proportion of the population. They have very significant budgets. So this 274 billion is the estimated value of the purple pound here in the UK. So that's the annual spending budget of disabled people and their families. So this is disposable income that they want to spend, and they might well spend on your products if they're able to consume your ads successfully. And 75% of disabled people say that UK businesses' digital products and services are not designed well enough for them. If you hear little pauses, it's because I'm listening to the next bit of something that I'm going to say. So yeah, there's a very significant amount of research out there. I could show you so many other stats from the Big Hack. It's the business case for accessible design. Just search for Big Hack, and you'll see that, there's a very significant business case. But because I've got quite a bit to cover, I'm only going to touch on a very few stats. I'm not going to be stat heavy at all. If we move on to the next slide. Now, the all-in census, I absolutely had to include a couple from here. Sharon's mentioned a few more. I think she's mentioned these ones as well, but I really wanted to highlight them because it's not just about who you're advertising to and whether they can access that content. It's also about the industry, and a workplace that is diverse is a happier workplace. The Health and Safety Executive and the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, have brought out compelling data to say that the more diverse a workforce is, the happier it is, the longer they'll stay in work, the more productive they are. And that goes down to the team level. If any individual team is, more diverse, then they're happier and more productive, take less sick leave, etc. So from your all-in census, 1 in 5 are likely to leave because of issues related to their disability. And so it's, a challenging workforce. It's stressful being in work in this kind of fast-paced age anyway. But if you've got a disability where, there are issues with integration, with acceptance, with accommodations, then it can be supremely challenging. And so that 22% churn compared to 12% for, people without a disability, those are valuable team members, valuable colleagues, and a more diverse workforce is going to be reflected in the products that you produce. On-screen diversity obviously is important, not making massive faux pas, reflecting a diverse population. So this is all incredibly important. 27% are made to feel uncomfortable. I think Sharon covered that one as well. So yeah, this is, real life experiences of people with disabilities within the industry. And we mentioned the Valuable 500 was mentioned earlier, and Caroline Casey. Just watch anything by her on the internet and you will start crying. Um, Look on YouTube for hashtag diverseish. They're brilliant videos that again will make you laugh and cry as well. So we move on to the next slide. So we've covered the ethical, we've covered the kind of business, and now let's quickly cover the legal. Yes, it is a legal requirement. Under the Equality Act 2010, you have to make reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities, and most of the things that Mike was talking about earlier, from a keyguard to on your keyboard to maybe turning off the key repeat on in the OS settings, very simple low tech things. 85% of adjustments for people with disabilities are free. So we're not talking about making major changes, although in some cases we might be, but you absolutely need to do that because the ROI is huge. Just think of medical retirement and how much that costs, £200,000 to £400 to medically retire somebody. 200 to 400. So hold on to those people, guys. And then if you in any way touch the public sector, then there is another legal requirement. We've got WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but basically there are guidelines that, for digital, and it's very clear in there that you need to comply with those. And there's been a lot of excitement and activity in the public sector recently because the deadlines that this PS bar set of regulations have been very clearly stating have been whizzing by for your intranet, for your website, for your mobile apps. And unlike with the Equality Act, I would love it if it was the same, but with PS bar legislation, there is a named body for monitoring the industry, the public sector. That's the CDDO, Centre of Digital Data Office Order, and the EHRC are fining organisations that don't comply. So the proactive monitoring, I wish there was for the rest of the sectors as well. So yeah, there's been a huge amount of activity in there. So if we move on to the next slide. Inclusive design benefits all, and I've touched upon this a little bit earlier. Basically, here we've got a nice infographic from Microsoft, and they're basically saying that, particularly with mobile, small sheet of shiny glass on a sunny day, using your phone one-handed, bumpy bus, noisy cafe. There are so many times when people who don't consider themselves to have any impairment at all are sliding up and down that scale of impairment, and their needs, if you're juggling your phone one-handed or being jostled on a bus, your needs for accessibility are exactly the same as someone with a motor difficulty 24/7, like Mike, where you need to have minimum tappable areas, 44 by 44 px if you're interested, with good separation of white space so you don't accidentally tap the wrong button, etc. Bright sunny days, shiny sheet of glass, you have the exact same requirements of color contrast and decent default font sizes as someone with a vision impairment 24/7, etc, etc. I could go on. So yeah, please believe that we talked about the people with different impairment categories. We're now including every single other consumer of your content on a daily basis. So yeah, I think the business case for really being passionate about accessibility is somewhat overwhelming. If we move on to the next slide. So here's, I mentioned about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines before. Obviously, if your role is digital, then you really need to kind of start thinking about what the guidelines cover. But everybody touches digital. So what does it mean for people that are, churning out email, marketing ads or, digital campaigns or whatever it is with a fast turnover? Well, there are kind of shortcuts, and this is a brilliant example. Helen Wilson of Worcestershire County Council put this infographic together, Sculpt. So this is a kind of a slightly tortured acronym. So yeah, we've got structure, use headings. I need headings as a blind person because I can just hit H to jump down through the headings in a page and quickly get an idea of the structure of what's going on. Oh, and that's an H1, and all these are all H2s, so they're kind of like the children of that main one, etc. So I know when I'm in a kind of a subsection of a page and all that sort of thing. It's all good stuff. Google will give you massive brownie points for good structure and good semantic content, as it's called. So if you just add headings for me, then you'll get better natural SEO as well. And obviously we all want that. Color and contrast for C. So yeah, I briefly touched upon it before. Use color with decent contrast so that people can see that on a sunny day, or if they've got a vision impairment. Avoid using certain color combinations. 1 in 5 males in the UK, or well, worldwide, I would imagine, have a color deficit condition, slightly fewer women. So don't use combos of red, green and blue, yellow, etc. when they're tonally quite similar, because they won't be able to see that content. The U's a really torturous one. That's use of images or use of alternative text. You guys are pros about use of images to back up your content, and I'm sure that there's stunning use of graphics in what you do on a daily basis. But if you don't put an alternative text description to that, then I just get image, or in the worst case scenario, the file name is exposed to me, so I get a great big ugly thing. In Amazon, all the product images are about 58 million characters, random character string for me, so that's not a good look, kind of brand trust wise, and I certainly don't get the content of what those product images are. Then we've got links. If you say click here for an amazing 20% off deal or something, and you've underlined the click here bit, then when I pull all the links up into a list, which I can do to quickly get to the, I don't know, contact us link on a page or something, then I'm just going to get click here. So it's really important to make sure that links make sense out of context, and also just tab through the page and make sure that when you land on those links, you can tell where the focus has landed. Sometimes they're not, they don't change at all, or there might be a tiny faint outline or something. So make sure that people can visually track what's going on. Make sure there's a logical tabbing order as you tab through, it doesn't jump all over the shop. And also, like I said, make sure that they make sense out of context as well. And just try hitting enter or pressing spacebar on those links, and make sure that they don't need a mouse to be able to be activated as well. Plain English, you guys know all about sculpting your words and smithing your sentences, etc. But make sure that you don't use fancy words for the sake of it. Stick with Anglo-Saxon rather than Latin or Greek origin words, please, and that will help loads of people with learning difficulty, or with literacy difficulties, or for whom English isn't their first language. And lastly, tables. Well, I say lastly, there is actually a lot more to it than this, but this is a brilliant summary of the top ones to think about. If you're sending out an email ad to someone, don't format it using tables, please. Similarly, on a web page, don't make the whole thing one great big table. Tables are for data, and keep them nice and simple if you are going to use a table for data. I'm not going to go into why it's challenging, but it really is. So yeah, tables are for data, guys. If we move on to the next slide. So what we've got here is a shameless plug for my daily podcast. I'm up to episode 1750 something, haven't missed a day, talking about how you can use your smart speaker for everything from grocery shopping to playing games to keeping yourself organized or relaxed, whatever it might be. This is the age of ambient computing. We're absolutely in the age where people can just talk to the air and hopefully get some useful information, content, whatever it is, back again. So we had the PC back in the 80s, then we had the mobile phone in the noughties, and now we've got the age of ambient computing, where you don't even need to read a manual. The manual doesn't even exist. You just say something intuitive and hopefully get some brilliant content back. And advertising is definitely present on these platforms, so you need to be thinking about what your content, what your strategy is for smart speakers or AI assistants. You can talk to a lot of things these days, and make sure that things are going to be inclusive when they are delivered. Obviously, a lot of Echoes have a screen, and there's brilliant accessibility features built into those. So don't think that you're just talking about ones without a screen here. There's a lot of scope for advertising on smart speakers with always on screens, guys. So yeah, there's a lot to be talked about there, and I'd be happy to take those conversations offline. But I want to make you aware that the technology isn't standing still. Platforms are proliferating, and it's so important now to get comfortable and embrace the basic concepts of accessibility so that you can deliver inclusive content today and so that you're then better placed to start thinking about what inclusive content on the platforms of tomorrow look like, because it's not going to get simpler, guys. It's going to get more and more elaborate in what you can deliver your content on. And to that end, if we look at the next slide, this is me wearing some VR glasses. I was in Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and these glasses layer on a lot of information when you look at things. There was one booth where you looked at a big TV screen of a football match playing, and the tags followed all of the players saying who they were, and you could get stats on them and that sort of thing. Another one was a shop mock-up, and any product that you picked up and put in front of the glasses, it gave you information about that. So will all windows that people walk past in bus stops or shop windows or whatever be blank canvases for advertising in the future? Probably, because advertising real estate is valuable, and if you can use, screens to deliver that content that people can look through, i.e. just glasses or windows, then they'll be using that space. So what does inclusive content look like when you don't even control the background to the, it's not just a screen with a back anymore, it's something where you can actually see through it, and there are extra considerations there. So very quickly moving on, what I'm going to do now is ask you guys very kindly to do a tiny bit of work. So if you wouldn't mind, what we're going to hear now is a garbled audio version of CAPTCHA. We all know what CAPTCHA is. Here we've got an example of a very straightforward CAPTCHA code, just some, mangled. Is this the one with mangled letters, or is this a picture of some street signs or something? I can't remember what image I put in here. But anyway, we all know what CAPTCHA is. Either you have to pick out, cars from obscured images, or you have to look at a garbled code. For me as a blind person, I click on the wheelchair symbol, which is an odd thing for people who want an audio version. But anyway, and I will hear what you guys are about to hear. And I want you guys, if you don't mind, to put in the chat what you think the code is. And I want you to try really hard.
9, 0, 3, 7, 9, 7, 6, once again, 9, 0, 3, 7, 9, 7,
Okay, so yeah, repeated it twice for you there. I don't know if anyone's tried to put the code into the chat there. I bet a lot of people will have just put no idea or something like that. I've done this to a room of 1,850 people, and I asked them to compare notes with the people around them to see if anyone got the same code, and then put their hand up if they had, and no hands went up. So on one level, this is hilarious. On another, this is tragic, because we know what these CAPTCHAs are there for. They're to complete sometimes a very lengthy process, and always important process, to be able to set up an online account, whatever it might be. This is what inaccessibility feels like in a tangible way. This is the sort of inaccessibility I have to put up with, or kind of contend with, every single day. It might be a tough CAPTCHA challenge to crack, or it might be unlabeled images, or it might be unstructured pages. This is just one example of the kind of, just take away the feeling of what you had there, and then think that's what I'm actually creating in people, in my customers, when I'm advertising inaccessibly, or when my content, or when the job ads for jobs in the industry, or when the online application process, or when the onboarding and people come into the industry and then are able to use the tools that they need, like Mike was talking about, or the systems that they're going to be using are inaccessible. So I'll just finish off by saying that as a blind person, I miss many adverts, the gist of what the adverts are, because none of you would consider, unless you're John Lewis, not putting your logo up at some point in the advert so that people know what it is. Adverts can be very obscure these days, but you wouldn't dream of not saying who the brand was. I don't get that, because it's hardly ever voiced. So, you know, you're losing me and you're losing all the people that are popping out to make a cup of tea who would otherwise hear the ad and hear the brand spoken at the end of the ad. So, you know, a lot of the advertising industry's money is wasted on someone like myself. And just think about what an inclusive ad industry would look like, where people really have faith in the brands that they hear advertised because they're done in an inclusive way, in whatever platform it is, TV, radio, digital, and then they have a brilliant and supportive experience when they actually decide to start working for that organization for whatever reason. And then we have happy users, a diverse workforce, and brilliant content that reflects a diverse population as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Sorry,
Yeah, I could see some people clapping. I was so inspiring and interesting. And the irony is not lost on me that I don't have an impairment. I'm the one speaker on the call that doesn't, and I couldn't share my screen at the beginning of the call. So yeah, I'm just totally humbled by that, and it's so interesting. I hope it's opened a lot of our eyes to, you know, just what we can do in our workplace. There's just small amends that could actually really make a difference to all of us, actually. I'm really conscious of time. I'm very happy to go over for 5 minutes if everyone's happy to do that, if there are any burning questions. But equally, as with the last session, please do share questions, you know, on the email to either to Bina or inclusion@adslop.org.uk. But does anyone have a question for Robin or Mike? If you're happy to hang on for a couple of minutes. I think we're all just agog about what we need to learn and what we need to do. I think the big takeaways are definitely about the education, Mike, that you mentioned about the tech, because it seems like it's so fast moving. And we just heard about the ambient computing as well. I mean, I just think there's so much we can all learn. So maybe that could be a next step from us to just put that all together. Okay, see a question. Would love to know what organisations you feel are producing amazing accessible content. That's a great question from Phil.
From my point of view, I think nothing springs to mind with regards to advertising, but certainly content-wise, platform-wise, the big players, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples, are massively prioritizing inclusion. Many, you know, organizations in the private sector, I'm thinking Barclays as a retail bank pops to mind, very vocal on inclusion and accessibility, and they're definitely walking the walk as well as talking it. So and reaping the benefits as well. There's a very significant business case study on our website about, well, there's loads of case studies on our website, to be honest. So yeah, the ROI is very significant, but apologies, I can't think of anyone when it comes to advertising specifically.
No, and from my experience, yeah, I think, yeah, women's rights, I think the big corporates are doing it well on a corporate level, but yeah, day-to-day advertising, I'm really struggling to find good examples. I think on one kind that I work on, Smart Energy, they're quite good on all their YouTube adverts. They take CAPTCHA, which is really quite useful. But yeah, I think there's still quite a few examples in the advertising industry at the moment.
Thanks, Mike. So I suppose our big call out to everyone on the call is you know, go back to your organisations and please make sure that you do audit your website. I think that's the big call out. That's the first part of the call out and the action. Whatever it throws up in terms of amendments that need to be made, please put that in the budget for next year. We've actually spoken to lots of our members, and it's often the changes are things that they can do internally. They've got the capacity and the skill set in-house. So it's just that initial cost for an audit, which I don't think is too much money. But obviously we're going to be sharing more details on the All-In Hub. And this is just the very first step. It's Disability History Month, I think, rather than Awareness Month. No better time than now to just trigger that audit. And we'll be coming to you next year. We'll be revealing the next action for disability, which will look much more at the sort of actual front door. We'll be looking at the physical spaces that we work in and making sure that they're accessible for all. But I think this is, as I said earlier, such a game changer for people, a huge signal to people that have those needs. And as Robin has highlighted, we'll all need them. We all need those changes as we age, as we go through life, different things happen. And that's so fascinating to get that insight into how we can improve the work that we create as well, Robin. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.